Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we have our first deck tech for the £10 challenge. What we're going to be looking at is Blue-Green Threshold. Now, a version of this deck, I will admit a better version of this deck, competed in the World Championships in 2002. So again, for the budget we have, we can build a pretty good, and in some ways better, some ways less consistent version of that deck. So let's jump in and I'll show you what we've got. So first up, we have the cards which give us the namesake of the deck, the Threshold creatures. We're running 4 Nimble Mongoose, which is green for a 1/1 Mongoose with Shroud and Threshold. Nimble Mongoose gets +2/+2 as long as there are 7 or more cards in your graveyard. We're also running 4 Werebear, which is 1 green for a 1/1 that also taps for a green and has Threshold. Werebear gets +3/+3 as long as there are 7 or more cards in your graveyard. So the aim of the deck is to play cheap creatures and then using the Threshold mechanic to power them out and make them bigger. Basically, they're Tarmogoyf. For £10, what can you say? To pump up these creatures, we need ways of getting cards into the graveyard. So we're running 1 Wild Mongrel, which is 1 green for a 2/2. It has the ability, discard a card from your hand, Wild Mongrel gets +1/+1 and becomes the colour of your choice until end of turn. We're also running 3 Noose Constrictor, which are a slightly cheaper version of Wild Mongrel. So Noose Constrictor is 1 green for a 2/2 snake. It has reach and discard a card. Noose Constrictor gets +1/+1 until end of turn. We're running 4 Aquamoeba, which is 1 and a blue for a 1/3 beast, which has discard a card from your hand, switch Aquamoeba's power and toughness until end of turn. So there we have 8 creatures which can discard cards at instant speed at any point to just keep filling up our graveyard to help trigger Threshold for our Werebear and our Nimble Mongoose. We also have other cards to help churn through our graveyard, draw us cards while also filling up the graveyard for Threshold. So we have 4 Breakthrough, which is X and a blue for a sorcery, draw 4 cards, then choose X cards in your hand and discard the rest. Sometimes it's correct to X is 0, so 1 blue, draw 4 cards, dump everything into your graveyard if it will trigger Threshold. Normally it's correct to do it for 1 or 2, so you can kind of keep like a Werebear back or something like that, but generally this is draw 4 cards, put 4 or 5 cards into the bin, which really gets you close to Threshold very quickly. The next card we're running is for Thought Scour. Thought Scour is 1 blue for an instant. Target player puts the top 2 cards of his or her library into his or her graveyard and draw a card. Now that player is, generally speaking, you. So this 1 card puts 3 cards into our bin, because obviously it itself goes into the bin. So with 1 card, we are almost halfway to getting Threshold and making our Werebears and our Nimble Mongooses that much bigger, so they're much better in combat. Obviously this is an instant as well, so you can use it as a combat trick. You can swing with your Nimble Mongoose and Werebear with 4 cards in the graveyard, and then with this 1 card combat trick, so then you can really rumble in and do a ton of damage. We're also running 4 Ray of Erasure, which is 1 blue for an instant. Target player takes the top card of his or her library and puts it into his or her graveyard. Draw a card at the beginning of the next turn's upkeep. This is Thought Scour 5 to 8. We need that extra bit of redundancy, that extra bit of card draw. It still puts 2 cards into your graveyard and replaces itself, which is still great in this deck. And it was nice and cheap, so we will take it. For some added spice, we are running 2 Bazaar Trademage, 2 and a blue for a human wizard, and it's a 3/4. It has flying, and when Bazaar Trademage enters the battlefield, draw 2 cards and discard 3 cards. So often these kind of cards aren't great because you're drawing 2 and discarding 3, so you're down cards. But with this really helps. This puts 3 cards into the graveyard and is a 3/4 flying body, which is still really good. So we've already gone through our Threshold payoffs and our ways of getting cards into the graveyard. Now we have some really cool cards which do well when they're in the graveyard. We're running 3 Ray of Wurm, is 6 and a green for a sorcery. Put a 6/6 green worm creature token onto the battlefield. It has flashback, 3 and a green. Now shockingly, we are only really going to be playing this for the flashback cost, because we can instant speed, put it into the graveyard, leave it there, get in some damage with Nimble Mongoose and Werebear. If they ever become unclassed or you just have some mana spare, spend that 4 mana, get yourself a 6/6. It's fantastic. We're also running 2 copies of Wonder, which is a great card to get into your graveyard. Wonder is 3 and a blue for a creature incarnation? Sick. It is a 2/2 and it has flying. As long as Wonder is in your graveyard and you control an island, creatures you control have flying. Now this is one of our best win cons of the deck. Using Breakthrough and Thought Scour and Ray of Erasure, or the creatures, so like Noose Constrictor, put this into the graveyard when you control an island, everything gets evasion. So on turn 2 or 3, you can have 2 4/4s that are flying. It really does help get your damage through. It's awesome. To round off the deck, we're running 1 copy of Genesis, which is a great card to get into your graveyard. Genesis is 4 and a green for another creature incarnation. It is a 4/4, and at the beginning of your upkeep, if Genesis is in your graveyard, you may pay 2 and a green. If you do, return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. This just really helps in the long, grindy games, because you can just return a Bazaar Trademage if you just need an extra some flying damage. If you need to get back your Nimble Mongoose or a Werebear, just to help with the late game, gives you that extra bit of redundancy, and it's just a great card to just get into your graveyard early on. You know it's there, and you can use it whenever you need to. We're also running 1 copy of Arrogant Wurm, 3 green for a 4/4 Wurm, with Trample and Madness 2 and a green. So again, this effectively in our deck is 2 and a green for a 4/4 Trample, which is awesome. We would probably be running more of these, but these are a bit pricey, and we needed to get to 60 cards. For our mana, we're running 4 copies of Evolving Wilds and 1 copy of Terramorphic Expanse. Fetch lands, even the budget ones, are great in this deck because it fixes us and puts a card in the graveyard to help with Threshold. To round off the deck, we're running 8 basic forests and 10 basic islands. I found when running it that even though you want to get your Nimble Mongoose out as quickly as possible, getting the turn 1 or 2 Thought Scour or Ray of Erasure is kind of more important, so it's more valuable to hit the blue sources early than the green. But generally speaking, I haven't found the mana to be an issue in this deck. So that's the base 60. We didn't have any leftover money for a sideboard, but the deck's perfect, so why would you need a sideboard? The other considerations for the deck I had were running 4 Basking Rootwaller, which works really well with Wild Mongrel and the Aquamoeba stuff, but for me it was more important to trigger the Threshold and get creatures in, and get cards into the graveyard so you can start hitting damage with the Nimble Mongooses and the Werebears. What I like about this deck is that it really lets you start rumbling with some powerful creatures really early on. Like on turn 2 and 3, you can be hitting with 3/3s and 4/4s. They can have flying. You can have a big Wurm with Trample. You really feel like you're getting away with something with this deck, which is awesome when it only costs less than £10. There's some really cool lines of play, like Thought Scouring at instant speed to fill up your graveyard, to make your creatures bigger. Sometimes it's worth doing it before combat, so you can try and get that Wonder into the graveyard just to give your whole team evasion. Playing with the Bazaar Baghdad effect is really cool. So, I hope you like the look of the deck. Thank you very much for watching. Let us know if you have any ideas for the £10 challenge, anything we can build or work around. And you can let me know if there's any changes you think I should have made to this deck, if there's any cards I've missed, any replacements, anything like that. It's always cool to hear from people. So, thank you very much for watching, and goodbye!